President Biden dismissed his bad polling numbers Thursday, saying he won the 2020 presidential election despite poor polling during the Democratic primary. I know the polling numbers are not good, but they were the same way when I ran and won. Everybody thought I was going to get clobbered in the primary. I got 80 million votes in the last election. Biden said in an MSNBC interview with host Nicole Wallace. Biden's 80 million votes in the 2020 election set the record for the most votes cast for any presidential candidate, in part because more votes were cast in 2020 than in any other U.S. election. During the Democratic primary, Biden's bid seemed all but over after disappointing results in Iowa and New Hampshire, but it was turned around when he won the South Carolina primary, largely due to Representative Jim Clyburn's endorsement. Now Biden is campaigning for his re-election, as recent polls have shown the president struggling to reach much above a 40% approval rating. A poll this week showed 34% of U.S. adults approve of the president's handling of the economy, while another poll showed that 68% of Americans are concerned about the president's mental and physical health. He noted in the interview with MSNBC the better than expected results Democrats had in the midterm elections, which he claimed he predicted. I remember I was saying that I thought the Democratic Party was going to do extremely well in the off-year election, he said. We're going to lose 40 seats and all that, he recalled people predicting at the time. Democrats in 2020 held on to the Senate, increasing their margin by 1 seat, and were able to hold on to more seats in the House than expected. I like how they don't mention that they still lost the House anyway. Like, yeah, you expanded your slim majority in the Senate by 1 seat, and you didn't lose the House as badly as people thought you were going to. So, where Biden says, I know the polling numbers are not good, but they were the same way when I ran and won. That's something of a misstatement, because for those of you that don't remember, the sequence of events was Biden did very poorly in Iowa, and then he did very poorly in New Hampshire, and he didn't do that well in Nevada either. And after losing these 3 states to Sanders, the other moderate candidates, like the stupid mayor from Indiana and Klobuchar, dropped out and endorsed Biden. And then after they consolidated that moderate slash anti-Sanders slash Trump derangement syndrome vote, they were able to win South Carolina. And then he had a sweep of most of the states during Super Tuesday in the subsequent contest. So where he says, oh, I was able to win and I did very well despite the polling showing that I was doing poorly. The polling for most of those states after the first couple of primaries was actually fairly accurate. In fact, you go and you look at South Carolina from the months leading up to when Biden ultimately won it, Sanders wasn't doing too well there anyway. But that's just me saying that polling sometimes can either be very off or very accurate. And in his case, I think it was very accurate up until the other moderate candidates dropped out and got behind him, and then it became very much convincing that he was going to win the states after that because they had all consolidated that vote. Now, be that as it may, he should be afraid of this polling because he's underestimating the fact that there are a lot of people who think he's too old, who are not impressed with, I mean, like, there are progressives that don't like him, such as myself. There are some of the more moderate voters who maybe they don't like him, but they also really do not like Trump or the Republicans, so they might vote for him. They might sit the election out. Could go either way, really. But he's trying to basically hope that the polling is off and that people, they may not like everything he's done, or they might not agree with all of his tactics and actions, but, we'll come together to restore the soul of America. And I think he's a real idiot if he believes that he doesn't have to change up something or otherwise quell concerns. But this is what happens when these narcissists win these elections. They become overconfident. They start predicting that there's no chance of failure. And sure enough, we saw the same thing with Trump. You go and you look at his interviews from 2019. He was saying he was going to win, and we'll never stop winning, and you'll and believe me, and I'm the chosen one. We discussed that before. Just a lot of times, I don't know if it's them really believing that there's just no chance of them being defeated, or they want to, I guess, ease the concerns of their actual supporters. Maybe it's a mixture of both. But I think it's really stupid to not say, listen, this is a contentious, divided country. I'm going to make the best case for why I should be reelected. There are legitimate concerns about my age and other things like that, but I can assure them that I am feeling very well. I'll have my doctor's notes be released. I mean, if he responded that way, I would, even as a person that doesn't like him, have a little bit more respect because he's actually admitting that he's not infallible, that there are ways in which people can have legitimate concerns, even if they want to vote for him or support him over the Republican, whatever, about him that should be responded to in a non, I hate to be redundant, a non-answer way where, you start talking about the polls back then were showing that I was down, but I won. And then you don't even represent the polling correctly. The polling for the general election showed he was going to win. And ironically enough, the polling at that time that showed he was going to win overestimated him. Because, at a certain point, we were thinking he was going to pick up Texas and possibly Louisiana. And he did none of those things. And even in the states he won, like Arizona and Georgia, it was by razor thin margins. So it's just kind of funny that, like, he's right that polls can be off. But in the case of the primary from 2020, they were only incorrect because they didn't account for these other candidates dropping out for those later states as they did. And in the case of the general election, they put too much confidence in him, which showed he was going to pick up multiple states that he ultimately either outright did not win or just barely won. Like the actual, it's kind of scary, and people have made this comment before. There's like I think it's like 400,000. There's some number of votes under a million that if they swung differently in 3 states, Biden would not have won. And it's disturbing when you consider that he beat Trump by over 5 million votes and still, by virtue of the Electoral College, barely won. So it's just one of those things where people, this is what happens when they get too confident. They start believing in their own hype, and it can be their downfall. So he's laughing about, oh, the polls are off now, but wait until we get President DeSantis or, God forbid, any of these other people, or the non-consecutive second Trump term from him thinking, I was going to win. The polls showed me as being behind, but I showed him again. No,